Welcome to another video, folks. We're going to be working on the escort platoon for the Stug formations in German Bagration. We're going to be using some tools to do some cleanup. You know, like a sharp hobby knife. This plastic requires a sharp knife, and some snippers to remove them from the bits of sprue. And as always, folks, when you're dealing with these sharp things, just watch those fingers. Now, I'm very carefully following the mould lines around the figure. There's not a lot on these guys. I've found these thermoplastics are very equivalent to metal in terms of the amount of flash there is, but you have to be patient and careful. It's a soft material, so don't try and rush it. If you do, you could end up gouging off something important, for instance spoiling the curve on the top of the helmet, or maybe some of the folds in the materials, the cloth. As always, I've given the figure an undercoat of German Camo black brown, and we're going to start by painting the camouflage. Now, when we're painting this, we're not worried too much about leaving shade in the way I would normally do so, because the camouflage pattern will end up obliterating a lot of the internal shade on the jacket, so we'll come back and add that in. So the colour I'm using here is different from what I've used in previous videos. It's German Camo Biege World War II. It's quite a light colour, so get it on thin with a second coat on top. Don't try and get it all on in a oneer. So we can be a bit careless at this point, folks, but that doesn't mean we should be. You know, so the external shade, that is like the shade between the tunic and objects that the figure might be wearing, you want to try and keep that. That will save you a bit of time later on when you are doing what I call the cutting in of the finished look of the camo. Starting with Panzerhase's Splinter Blotches 2, we're going to add the brown blotches. Now, when you're doing this, try and keep the blotches as angular as possible. They're not round, they've got straight edges, so it might be that you paint a straight line and then do a little angular blotch coming off it, or do one angular blotch with another angular blotch set off a little underneath or above it, so that you're creating angular shapes and not dominating too much, because you've still got some green to add and you want to see that base colour when you're finished. Now, the green I'm using, something I've stayed away from before but it works good with this combination, is Panzerhase's Splinter Blotches 1. It's a very, very bright green, as you see, and you want to be just placing this next to the brown blotches but in less density and less volume, so that you're getting a nice balance between all three colour elements that we're adding to the camo. Now we're doing the cutting in with the shade colour, that's German Camo black brown, to put in the shade that adding the camo has removed. So you can see little details like the little ties on the helmet there, and then you've got the hem, for instance, and then you've got folds in the cloth, then external shade around the equipment that's on the uniform, such as the bedroll and hands and all these kind of things, and that will give a nice sharp finish to the camo, so the tunic's got a distinctive shape even though it's overall camouflaged. For the trousers, I'm using my standard colour here for field grey, which is Panzerhase's dark mud with the highlight of green grey. So here we do want to be leaving the shade in the internal shade, so to speak, in the area we're painting. There's folds in those trousers, so make sure that you leave the shade in the folds, but as always, don't leave too much or it becomes too dominant. As I'm waiting on the trousers to dry there, I'm adding some black. I'm adding it in areas, for instance, such as the boots, where I'm going to be leaving them really quite dark black kind of colour. I'm adding it to the metallic equipment on the back of the figure, or perhaps the grenade that's in his belt. But be very careful that you don't go over any areas that you've already finished, and that you don't excessively paint this around areas that you want to leave with shade in the German Camo black brown. Now I'm adding the highlight with green grey to the dark mud on the trousers, and you can see it's a thin brush here, folks, very thin lines. Keep your highlight as close as possible to the shade for the maximum contrast. I'm using old wood here for the gaiters and for the ammunition satchels and the bread bag. Using the one colour across them all, it's an appropriate colour to use, and it will save you a bit of time, especially when you're painting a whole unit. You're not using a multitude of colours for something which is just a bit of detail. And this choice of colour is also good strong contrast against the camouflage colours, whereas something such as green grey might not be such a good contrast. And just take your time around those ammo pouches. You want to be leaving a bit of shade in all the details, but not too much. And then I'm using Iraqi sand to highlight the old wood. You can see once again very thin lines. That's really helping to make that old wood sort of pop out from the figure, really helping to start to frame everything now and bring things into focus. You can see the ammo pouches standing out strongly against the camouflage background. Now it's over to German grey. I'm using that as effectively the main colour on the boots and the guns, but the difference with the guns and the other metallic parts is I'll use London grey for a highlight, whereas the boots I will just leave with the German grey. And you can see again very thin lines with the London grey. Just helps give those dark areas a bit of highlight, makes them pop, but it doesn't it gives them a metallic edge and it doesn't make them look too bright. Now on to the browns, and I'm using German Camo medium brown for this. And then, I mean, that could be a wooden bit, it could be a leather bit, but I'm going to give them all the same colour, and I'm going to highlight the leather in orange brown and the wooden areas with model colour field drab, so you get distinctive looks with the same base colour, and you can tell them apart, which is really important. And then the skin, we're starting with saddle brown as a shade colour, and then game colour bronze flesh tone with a highlight of model colour Flatflesh. And this is a nice warm but contrasting set of colours, and that will help frame, once again, help frame those skin areas and really make it pop. And there you go, the very final highlight going on. That's the Flatflesh, and it's a nice bright eye-catching colour to bring out all those important features that we recognise.